Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're breaking down a really fascinating thesis that connects a series of upcoming celestial events to a very specific 3.5-year prophetic timeline. So let's dig into the source material and see how it all supposedly fits together.
Okay, so the core claim here is pretty bold, that a specific 3.5-year countdown is set to begin, and it's all marked by very specific signs in the sky. The whole idea is that these aren't just random astronomical events, but key moments in a much bigger unfolding story.
And the thesis gets super specific about this window of time, exactly 1,260 days. It argues this whole thing kicks off with a total solar eclipse on March 20, 2034, which it calls the sackcloth sun, and wraps up right in time for the biblical fall feasts in September 2037. So you can see this isn't some vague prediction. It's a very precise timeline we really need to unpack.
Now, the entire argument is really built on this one idea from the book of Genesis. The core concept is that the sun, moon, and stars weren't just made for light. They were also created to act as signs for what it calls appointed times. So this single verse is basically the key for understanding all the astronomical data that's about to follow.
So you might be asking, what's the big deal with this one eclipse on March 20, 2034? Well, according to the source material, its timing, its unique characteristics, and the path it carves across the globe make it a huge statistical anomaly, and, in this view, the main anchor for this entire prophetic timeline.
And the source really emphasizes that this is not just any old eclipse. We're talking about a long-duration total eclipse, what it calls a super totality. That means over 4 minutes of deep midday darkness, which it argues lines up perfectly with that prophetic imagery of the sun becoming black as sackcloth.
And this is where it starts to get layered. See, it's not just a long eclipse. The date itself is crucial. March 20th is the vernal equinox, the astronomical first day of spring. It's this very specific combination of factors that really becomes the foundation for the whole argument.
The analysis claims the real power of this event comes from this incredibly rare convergence, what it calls a triangulated marker. So you've got the solar new year, the lunar religious new year, and a total solar eclipse all happening on the exact same day. The source argues the odds of all three of those things lining up are just astronomically low.
But then it gets even more specific, because the thesis argues that where the eclipse's shadow falls is just as important as when it happens. It's like the path of totality is being interpreted as this symbolic corridor of judgment across the globe.
So, the shadow starts its journey by sweeping across Central Africa, and that includes the nation of Sudan. The source material immediately connects this region to its ancient biblical name Cush, which it turns out plays a pretty specific role in end times prophecy.
And here's the connection they make. In the book of Ezekiel, Cush is listed as part of a coalition of nations that will attack Israel. So in this interpretation, the sky going dark over this specific land is seen as a kind of prophetic warning shot.
Now, this is maybe the most critical part of the eclipse's journey, according to the source. The path of totality cuts directly across Iran, and it doesn't just graze the country, it passes right over key strategic spots, including the site of its nuclear reactor at Bushehr.
And this is the central connection the source makes. The eclipse darkens Iran's coast on the exact day of the Persian New Year, which is a festival of light. The analysis links this incredible timing directly to a prophecy from Jeremiah about breaking the bow of Elam, interpreting that as a reference to modern Iran's military power.
But wait, before the sun is darkened, there's that famous biblical prophecy from Joel that says the moon must first turn to blood. So that brings us to a whole series of total lunar eclipses that the source identifies as the critical precursor events, kind of like the warning signs before the main show in 2034.
The source points to something called a blood moon tetrad. It's a super rare series of 4 back-to-back total lunar eclipses, all set to happen in the 2 years just before that 2034 eclipse. This exact sequence, first the moon, then the sun, is presented as a direct match for the required prophetic pattern.
So here are the dates for those 4 lunar eclipses. The analysis argues these aren't random at all. They're the specific warning signs leading up to the main event. But for them to be real signs, they'd need to line up with key biblical feast days. And this is where the source says there's a fascinating catch, and it's all about the calendar. Okay, so check this out, because this is the crucial point. On the modern calculated Jewish calendar that's used today, that first blood moon actually misses the Feast of Passover. But the source argues that's because the calendar has drifted over the centuries. It claims that if you go back to the original method, literally observing the barley harvest in Israel to start the new year, the calendar shifts, and that first blood moon lands exactly on Passover.
All right. Now we get to the mathematical heart of this whole thing. This is where the analysis claims to lock all these celestial events, the blood moons and the sackcloth sun, to a precise prophetic countdown with a crystal clear start and a very specific endpoint.
The analysis now zeroes in on a very specific number, 1,260 days. Now, if you've spent any time reading the books of Daniel and Revelation, you know this number. It pops up again and again, and it's almost always tied to a period of intense prophetic activity or tribulation. So, the thesis uses this exact number as its primary countdown.
So, what happens when you count exactly 1,260 days forward from that 2034 solar eclipse? Well, the end date you get is August 31st, 2037. And the source points out this isn't just a random day. It falls smack in the middle of Elul, which is the traditional 40-day period of reflection and repentance that leads right up to the final fall feasts.
But the analysis doesn't stop there. It brings in a second, related number, also from the book of Daniel, 1,290 days. It's exactly 30 days longer than the first count, and the source claims this addition provides an even more stunning and precise celestial lock.
So when you add that extra 30 days, the count lands precisely on September 30, 2037. And what the analysis highlights is that this is the exact date of Hoshana Rabbah, the final day of the fall feasts. In tradition, this is seen as the very last moment, the day when all divine judgments for the year are completely and irrevocably sealed.
So, as you can see, the source concludes that this mathematical lock is the real key, a countdown that kicks off with a rare eclipse on the biblical New Year and ends, to the day, on the final feast day 3.5 years later. It's presented as this structurally perfect convergence of the solar, lunar, and prophetic calendars.
So, after weaving together all this astronomy, geography, and mathematics, the thesis really leaves us with just one big provocative question. Is this whole web of connections just a massive statistical anomaly? Or is it, as the source suggests, a deliberate sign of the times? That's the central question this whole analysis asks us to think about.